Yesterday, as a matter of fact, the CBN talking about the monetary policy rate and all of that and how it does affect the economy, the exchange rate, external reserves. But the CBN governor did speak directly about this, and let's let you listen to this and we'll take it from there.
Follows. 1. By a unanimous vote to retain the monetary policy rate at 12% and the symmetric band at plus or minus 200 basis points for now. 2. To retain the CRR at 8%. 3. To adjust the midpoint of target official exchange rate from 150 naira to 155 naira in consistency with current market conditions, and to maintain the band of plus or minus 3%. This means that the naira should float roughly within a range of 150 naira to the dollar and 160 naira to the dollar, unless extraordinary shocks necessitate a change in stance.
Okay, Mr. Tilewa Oyefeso is a financial expert and a lawyer also. He's here to break it all down for you to understand it. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right, talk us through that unanimous decision where they predicated on what they talked about. How does it affect anything?
Well, I would want to say first of all that a lot of times we usually misconstrue, issues, or basically I would say there's always a missing link, as it were. Because all these issues started from the injection of public funds, into commercial banks in Nigeria in the first place. And this took place sometime in 2009 thereabout, where the CBN governor unanimously injected public funds, into banks.
That was a rescue mission. He was helping the nation and investors, isn't it?
Exactly. He was helping the nation, as it were. But, as a legal practitioner by training, you would agree with me that whenever you want to do anything, of course, there should be laid down procedures before you can do such things. Now, public funds, as far as we are concerned, are constitutional in nature, because the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria actually makes provisions for the expenditure of public funds. So, in expending public funds, it is right that you have to follow the laid down procedures in the Constitution before you can do that. Now, the funds injected into these commercial banks, they range into trillions of naira as we speak today. And of course, that is a whole lot, because once you consider the impact of that on the economy, you find that there will be a disequilibrium, in the economy. Like Section 80 of the Constitution, let me start from there. It makes provision regarding the expenditure of public funds. But you see, a lot of analysts and experts have come up to say that section restricts itself to, the Consolidated Revenue Fund. So when the CBN governor was invited to the National Assembly, to make a case, for the reason he deemed it fit to inject those funds into banks, he said, well, fine, they are public sector funds, but these funds are not within the purview of the Consolidated Revenue Fund. And as such, because of the urgency of the situation to bail out banks, we needed to do that. But
was that correct?
It wasn't correct. With due respect, it wasn't correct, because I would want to acknowledge the resilience of one of the members of the House of Assembly, that's Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila. When he saw that, he actually proceeded to court. And the question he wanted to ask the court was whether or not it was correct, like you used the word correct, to inject those funds into the banks without consulting the National Assembly by means of the passage of an enabling law to allow that. You see, now when we juxtapose that with several other jurisdictions, particularly in the United States, where there was a bailout plan that was carried out. I refer to the Economic Stabilization Act of 2008. You find that there was an urgent need to rescue the system, because the system was on the verge of collapse. And we're talking about the subprime mortgage crisis, and the crisis in the financial sector. But you see, the House sat over this issue. There was a proposal before the House, and an act was passed. You understand? An act was passed to give effect, to that. So,
sorry, I actually thought you were going to juxtapose that with the BOFIA.
Yes, I'll definitely do that. You see, I've read a lot of commentaries and articles by experts and opinion molders, and they have come up to say that the BOFIA actually gives the central bank governor enormous powers, and based on the provision of the BOFIA, the central bank governor can do all that he did. But you see, a diligent study of the BOFIA, particularly section 35 that has to do with, you know, salvaging commercial banks in grave situations, like what the CBN governor did, you find that, of course, the CBN governor has the powers to regulate banks, but of course these powers do not extend to using, you know, public funds to regulate commercial banks without an enabling law. That is the crux, you know, of my argument. Fine, the CBN governor has the powers to regularize the banks, you know, to make them be in good shape, but the truth of the matter is, before he can do this, he ought to follow the necessary procedure. That's the crux of the matter, and this procedure is laid down in section 80 to section 83 of the Constitution. But a particular highlight here is section 83 of the Constitution, which talks about, you know, the urgent need, where there's an urgent need, you know, to use public funds for any particular purpose. That urgent need, of course, must be presented to the National Assembly on the floor of the House of Assembly, and it will be there will be heated debates on this, and after which the National Assembly will pass, you know, an enabling law. That's why the section says, in the event of an urgency, there should be a contingency fund. That is, the National Assembly has the power to create a contingency fund where that is not provided for in the Consolidated Revenue Fund, and based on this contingency fund, funds can be advanced to take care of whatever purpose. So the idea is, nobody is saying that the central bank governor shouldn't do what he did, but the truth is, he did not follow the necessary and laid down procedure in carrying out, and the effect of that is very disastrous, and the effect of that is what we're experiencing today.
Oh, really?
How does it work? I mean, what are we let me ask you first of all, what are we experiencing today?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
What we're experiencing today is an economic disequilibrium. You see, that is why very, very freshly in our minds, we are talking about the devaluation of the naira all of a sudden. Now, it is not a question of devaluation of the naira, as it were. It's a question of misplacement of priorities, as it were, really, because if you take a look at the provisions of section 16 of the Constitution, it talks about the duty of the state to ensure that the economy is stable and that there's a balanced economy within, you know, the macroeconomic framework. You see, and this duty, as contained in section 16 of the Constitution, lawyers and experts will say those sections that I'm talking about here are not justiciable, meaning that you cannot go to court to enforce those sections. So how do you enforce those duties? But you see, there's a provision of the law, that's the Fiscal Responsibility Act, where a lot of people have not really commented on the application of the Fiscal Responsibility Act to the ongoing and the current trend, particularly within the financial sector and the activities, you know, of the CBN. There's a section in the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Before I go to that section, let me just highlight the preamble of the Act. The preamble of the Act says that this is an act to ensure prudent management of the nation's resources and to ensure accountability and transparency in government within the medium-term expenditure framework. And it says this act has been enacted to give effect and promote the observance of section 16, you know, of the Constitution. Now, the effect of that is to make section 16 a duty on the state to ensure that where policies are being carried out, particularly financial policies that borders on fiscal indicators, the members of the public must be carried along from the scratch. People must make their inputs in several corners from different quarters. But, you know, not a case where you're just taking decisions unanimously, you're just taking decisions without, you know, due consultation. Then, of course, we will experience what we are experiencing.